Mm-mm. Just wait for the kids to go in. Well, thank you all for being here this morning. And this is a quick series to sort of tie together a lot of the background history concerning Israel. And why it's helpful is because it lets us know where the big rocks fit. For instance, who could give me the purpose for World War I, biblically speaking? Yes. Right. It led to the Balfour Declaration. It also led to another document called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Does anybody heard of the Sykes-Picot Agreement from 1916? It's major. It's how the whole Middle East is carved up today. So George Sykes and Picot were French and English surveyors and made the modern map of the whole Middle East. So that's pretty significant. Yes.
I was going to add, it added the opportunity for Britain and all these major countries during World War II to divide up that area as they thought that, oh, I want this land and so wants that.
That was a Sykes-Picot, yeah.
Yeah, and so that gave that whole opportunity to really boil it down to where we have all these infighting amongst the nations now because it's done by geopolitical or geography rather than actually by the individual tribes and people.
Yeah, it was a land grab. So what I want to try to get across is, like, a lot of people who are historians still grapple with what did World War I accomplish. For us as believers, it cleared the land, okay? The Ottomans had been there since 1517 to 1917. For 400 years. They'd ruled over the land that was Israel. So World War II brought the people back. Now, there were 3 aliyahs, and aliyah means going up, like going up to Jerusalem. It's a Jewish term for Jewish immigration to Israel. So the 3 aliyahs before World War II. So World War II brought the people back. World War III will likely bring the king back. You've got the land, you've got the people, and we're waiting for the king. So we're going to start into this, and hopefully we can get some things out of it. If you'll turn with me to Psalms chapter 2. Walter, how do I change this from presenter view so I can see the whole thing? I'm sorry. I can't read it that small. I'll go ahead and read it there. Why do the nations conspire and peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord, against his anointed, saying, let us break the chains and throw off their shackles. The one enthroned in the heavens laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them with his wrath, saying, I have installed my king in Zion, my holy mountain. I will proclaim the Lord's decree, and he will say to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask me, and I will make nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise and be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and celebrate his rule with trembling. Kiss the Son, or else he be angry, and your way will lead to your destruction. For his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are those who take refuge in him. So Psalms 2 is really talking about the kingdom age, when Christ will rule over the nations like a rod of iron. He will smash them like pottery. We're hoping that this is what World War III, if you will, I use that in quotation marks, will lead to. And in this, I want you to really remember this verse, Leviticus 25:23. Highlight it in your Bible, because this whole land dispute of what's going on in Israel, this is the answer. It is the final answer from God. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you are residents in my land as foreigners and strangers. So who's he talking to in this passage in Leviticus chapter 23? He's talking to the Jews. He's saying, the land is mine. You're just tenants. So when people are dividing the land for peace, what are they really doing? They're tearing up, Matt said it, they're trying to tear away or squabbling over God's land. So in Micah 3, it says, then those who revered the Lord spoke with one another. The Lord took note and listened, and a book of remembrance was written before him for those who revered the Lord and thought on his name. They shall be mine, says the Lord of hosts, my special possession. In the day when I act, I will spare them as parents spare their children who serve them. Then once more you shall see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between those who serve God and the one who does not serve him. So for us, why do we study prophecy at all? We study it to be encouraged so that we know he's done what he said he was going to do in the past. All these prophecies have been fulfilled. That gives us hope that it's accurate, that it's timely, that this is really happening. What it does in the future is it tells us where we are in the series of events that is coming on the earth. The purpose is not to get it right, which is where a lot of mistakes are made, where people try to nail down and make doctrinal what's going to happen in the future. I don't ever want to do that. I want to show you that everything dovetails together, and you're going to see, hopefully by the end of this, that God's hand is indeed in it all. So go with me to Isaiah 40. This is a wonderful restoration of the land, and all through it, he's telling us what happened during Christ's time, what's happening now, and what's going to happen in the future. So can I get a reader for this one, Jacob? We're going from verse 3 to verse 5. Well, that's going to go longer than that, but.
A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
So we take this as when Christ came in his first advent, that all these things were accomplished through John the Baptist and through Christ, but there's going to be another time that it happens when he returns. Can we go to verse 12 through 14, if I can get a reader for this one? If you can see it. Can you see it all right?
Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or with the breadth of his hand marked off the heavens? Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountain on the scales and the hills in a balance? Who can fathom the spirit of the Lord, or instruct the Lord as his counselor? Whom did the Lord consult to enlighten him? And who taught him the right way? Who was it that taught him knowledge, or showed him the path of understanding?
So we're getting to the part where we understand the world is constantly grinding, it's constantly waves tossed and foaming about, and it's fearful for the rest of the world. What God's trying to say in all of Isaiah 40 is that he is firmly in control, and he takes it from the macro to the from the micro to the macro, so that you can see he has control over it all. Can I get a reader for this one, Isaiah 40? Continuing.
Surely the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They are regarded as dust on the scales. He weighs the islands as though they were fine dust. Lebanon is not sufficient for altar fires, nor its animals enough for burnt offerings. Before him all the nations are as nothing. They are regarded by him as worthless and less than nothing.
So isn't this amazing that it says the nations are nothing before him, and the islands are like dust on the scales? It's giving us a perspective that this whole world is not only minute, but almost insignificant to the Lord. Can we get another reader for this part?
Isaiah 40 Isaiah 40 passage?
Yeah, 21, starting at 21.
Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy, and he spreads them out like a tent to live in. He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of the world to nothing. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground, then he blows on them and they wither, and a whirlwind sweeps them away like chaff.
So in our conversations, when we're at the grocery store, the library, getting gas, whatever, Isaiah 40 is always there for you. Psalms 2 is always there for you. And when people are talking about, yeah, I'm really worried about what's going on, I've talked to like so many people that have just told me, I've stopped listening. I've stopped watching the news. I've stopped listening to the news. I've disconnected. I can't do it anymore. So these two passages are very powerful for us to share with them how the Lord's in control. So just bring it up in conversation. Have you read Psalms 2 lately? Have you read Isaiah 40? Because these are extremely comforting passages that show us who's in control.
To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens, who created all these. He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each of them by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, my cause is disregarded by my God? Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom.
So we're looking at these things because we know all the stuff that's going on in Israel is really compelling, and what Hamas has done. And who saw the hospital being blown up in Gaza on the news? Did you see it? Did you hear about it? Did you read a blog about it? YouTube it? Whatever? Yeah, y'all did. So who did they blame initially for this? Yeah.
You can't say that you saw the hospital blown up. You can't say that. What you can say is, did you hear the report about the hospital being blown up?
Yeah.
Because that's truly what it was. It was a report, but in actuality, it was a Scud missile or whatever that landed in the parking lot. And
Right. Was it Israel?
no.
Did everybody blame Israel?
Right.
If it's going to rain today, who gets blamed? Israel. If you have a hailstorm, it's Israel's fault. So the report was, all over the world, people reacted to this and blamed Israel. And it's like the quote by Winston Churchill. He says, truth hasn't got time to get up out of bed and pull out its pants before rumor has gone out and told everybody what's happened. And I love that by Winston because it's absolutely true. People immediately, viscerally react without knowing all the facts. And what I want to give to you now is a little tool for your pocket. It's a glass ruler, right? Why am I showing you a glass ruler? We look at time linearly, right? We have increments of inches and feet or centimeters and meters and kilometers, whatever. So we always look at it in a linear fashion. What if we were to see it from God's perspective? What if we were to turn this ruler around and look through it like a periscope or a telescope? Then we would see every image superimposed on top of each other, and they would collapse. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so we're going to try to do this and look at it in this way as we get towards it. So we're going to start off, because you're all familiar with it, you're all Americans and Virginians, you know the stuff very well. We're going to start with the Revolutionary War because that is the kingpin that gets this all going. So there's a constant tension, argument between England and France. It's never stopped all through history. It's in the architecture, it's in the art, it's in music. They hate each other and have always hated each other. So the recent part leading up to the leading up to the Revolutionary War was that the French had lost the Franco-Indian War in the United States, and they were just over the top angry and upset. So when they heard about the American colonists rebelling against England, they were like, this is the perfect solution. We'll just back them, let them do the fighting, give them guns, give them ships, whatever they need. And of course, the person who was perfect for the job was Benjamin Franklin. He was basically there as the ambassador from America. They loved him. They ate Ben Franklin up for breakfast because he was so different. One of the funniest stories is he was supposed to go to this huge banquet. I think it was at Versailles. He had sent his French clothes to the cleaners, just like we do. It wasn't ready. So he had to put on his Puritan outfit and go to this banquet, and they thought it was unbelievable. They proclaimed him nature boy, put a wreath on his head, and paraded him on a chair around the room. So, I mean, it's just like, everything he did delighted them, and everything John Adams did, they despised. So they were two different people, but he's the one who made it palatable for them to loan us money, give us troops, give us ships, give us weapons, give us ammunition. And so on February 6, 1776, France signed the Treaty of Amity of Commerce and a Treaty of Alliance. So what is the first thing you need as a nation? If you're gonna, Rob Scott, if you own your own island and you wanna be recognized by the international stage as a nation, what are you gonna do? Yeah, what else do you need to have your own nation and be your own emperor? You need a government, yep. But what do you need from other nations, Becky?
To recognize you.
Yeah, so how do you get them to recognize you? Have a constitution, but here's the big one that Americans are very good at: borrow money. You know, as soon as you borrow money from another country, you're going to be recognized. Because if you're not, they're never going to get paid back. So the secret agreement, the Treaty of Alliance, was made to the fledgling United States and France's allies against Great Britain in the Revolutionary War. The French decided to back the U.S. in military efforts until the U.S. had full independence from Great Britain. And that treaty was required France and the U.S. to work together on any peace agreement. So I'm going to skip the whole Revolutionary War and go right to the end. If it hadn't been for the French and the Battle of the Capes, have you all ever heard about the Battle of the Capes off of Virginia? Well, the French defeated the British right off of our coast, and then they blocked the entire Chesapeake Bay with ships, so Cornwallis could not get out. I mean, you talk about even doing that today, how many hundreds of ships it would take to block the entire Chesapeake Bay from the Atlantic. It's substantial. So it was included Lafayette. There are Lafayette streets all over America because of what he did for the United States. And this ended the war. And we're going to get into how it affected everybody. But first, I want to talk about this guy. How many of you all have heard of Chaim Salomon? He's a Jew, first generation to the United States. He paid for the Revolutionary War. One man. It's an incredible story. So he helped convert the French loans into ready-made cash by selling bills of exchange to Robert Morris, the superintendent of finance. From the period of 1781 to 84, records show Salomon fundraising and personal lending helped provide over $650,000, approximately $18 million in 2018 dollars. Sympathizing with the Patriots' cause, Salomon joined the New York branch of the Sons of Liberty. In September 1776, he was arrested as a spy. The British pardoned him, but only after requiring him to spend 18 months on a British boat as an interpreter for the Hessian soldiers, the German troops that were employed by the British. So the British had paid the Hessians to fight for them in America, and there's so many funny stories about that. It's amazing. But Solomon used his position to help the prisoners of the British escape and encourage the Hessians to desert the war effort. So I'm like, okay, we got this prisoner, he's Jewish, he's paying for the entire war, let's put him on a prison ship, and then we'll get him to communicate with the Hessians. And the Hessians escape and abandon the war because of Chaim Salomon. So the last thing, in 1778, Salomon was arrested again and sentenced to death. He managed to escape, making his way and his family to the rebel-held capital of Philadelphia. So nobody knows about this guy. He was incredible in what he did during the Revolutionary War, and he was Jewish. So there's a very famous letter George Washington wrote to the Jewish congregations in the United States saying, you're welcome here. You have religious freedom and you can stay, which is remarkable. So here's where it falls apart for France, and we're going to understand how this fits in the global stage. The immediate cause of the revolution was that France bankrupted itself. The French monarchy collapsed because they'd given so much money, so many arms to them that the aristocracy and the whole nine yards was on the verge of collapse. They owed a ridiculous amount of money, all for revenge. So the French spent enormous sums to beat the British to help the American Revolution. Neither nobility, aristocracy, or clergy had paid a direct tax without the consent of the established orders of society, or reorganization of the tax burden restores finances, and the French government failed. In 1788, the helpless King Louis XVI could not stop the financial hemorrhaging and was forced to accept representatives duly elected, the Estates General. This created what they called the Third State, and they were responsible for everything. So all of the power was hemorrhaging away because of finances from the king to this Estates General. And I know it's a little boring, but we're going to get there because this really has a lot to do with what happened. Now, everybody refers to the Bastille, the fall of the Bastille, as the signature event of the beginning of the French Revolution. I'm trying to show you a domino effect. The French and Indian War was lost by the French, so they wanted revenge against the British. They got involved in the American Independence War. That bankrupted them, which led to the French Revolution. And we're going to see how that affected the whole rest of the world. So the fall of the Bastille, in a similar mood of aggrieved self-righteousness and revolutionary exultation, came with the fall of the Bastille and the medieval fortress prison in Paris on 14 July 1789. In 1788, the catastrophic harvest had provoked food riots in Paris and nationwide. Louis XVI, alarmed by both the unrest and by the unexpected belligerence of the Third Estate, called his troops into Paris to maintain order. It was feared that he also aimed to suppress the National Assembly, which rallied its supporters. The Parisian electors, those qualified to choose the city's representatives in the Estates General, raised a militia of 48,000 men in the National Guard to protect the assembly. Its commander was the liberal-minded Marquis de Lafayette, who had fought as a volunteer in the American Revolution. So there were not that many prisoners in here when it happened, but the whole thing, they came there for gunpowder, and the National Guard was in charge of arms. On the July 14th, having ransacked the Invalides for muskets and cannons, it marched on the Bastille in search of gunpowder. When the governor, Delaney, appeared and offered resistance, it stormed the prison. Delaney and the other chief magistrates were lynched, their heads were stuck on pikes and paraded about. The events seem to be supporting literally epic making. In fact, the Bastille in 1789 only contained 8 prisoners, including lunatics, until the week before the fall, and it had been once briefly housed state prisoners, leading revolution figures of the Enlightenment as Voltaire and Derrida. So you can see there, this is the start of the whole thing, and they're just bloodthirsty because the monarchy had been living in such opulence at Versailles and Fontainebleau and all these other places, while the people had nothing to eat. And it was just unbelievable. So this starts with everything changing. The laws all start changing, and Napoleon is going to take it a whole new direction. But on the 26th of August, 1789, the Assembly passed the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizenship as the preamble to the Constitution, dawning up in 1791. So where do you think they got this idea of the rights of man? Bill of Rights and, right, Jefferson's writings, because who would have known about that? Lafayette, so they're going to model the French Revolution almost exactly out of the American Revolution. So one of these are happening right on top of each other. The Assembly decreed the abolition of the feudal system in its entirety, with the removal of privilege in France, the abolition of church tithes, in addition to drawing revenues from the ownership of 1/10 of the land. The church drew a tithe equivalent to 1/10 of the yield of the remaining land, and all rent, taxes, and services due from the peasants to noble owners, notability rents paid in the kind, and the corbier to forced labor and road repairs. Abolition of the seigneurial laws. Courts abolished the sale of offices and ended the exemption from direct taxation enjoyed by the church and the nobility. To cut it short, everybody who didn't pay taxes now had to pay taxes. All the church, all the aristocracy, and the nobility, it was that fun time was cut off. So now they had no money either. It was really a daring situation. In January 1793, Louis XVI was tried by the Convention of Crimes Against the Nation and sentenced to death by guillotine. Marie Antoinette, and where was she from originally? Marie Antoinette? She was the Austrian-Hungarian princess, and she didn't want to marry Louis. She was forced to. She hated being there. The people never really took a shine to her when she was there, but she had decadent parties, and she raised the opulence of the court. So Marie Antoinette, long defamed on suspicion of scheming for Austria's interests, was guillotined in October. The revolution violently broke with the French past issue of defiance, challenged the rest of Europe. In Dante's words, France threw down the gauntlet of Europe, and the gauntlet that was the head of the king. So imagine all of Europe having kings and queens and courtiers and nobility and aristocracy and all of that. This whole era was about to come to a screeching halt, and all the heads of Europe were under threat. So this is what everybody felt about France. Nothing in France is good. Don't buy their croissant, don't listen to their music, nothing. It was like it's a corrupting force and it's just gonna infiltrate. But the Bible had something to say about this, and we're gonna get to that. So the Reign of Terror, I won't read all of this. You can look at it on your own. I'll come to the conclusion that they were absolutely bloodthirsty and everybody was under suspicion. By the end, between 1793 and 1794, there were 16,500 official death sentences in France. Over 2,600 were just in Paris. Can you imagine guillotining that many people in a year? I mean, that's constant. And the people got used to this. It was almost a form of entertainment. So, did I go too far? I didn't, okay. So this springs out of this huge chaos comes order, and the order comes in the form of Napoleon Bonaparte, who quells the terror. So the Reign of Terror is simply the reign of that period of 11 months during the French Revolution. At this time, the French people who did not support the revolution were executed at the guillotine. The Reign of Terror started on the 5th of September, 1793, and the violence happened more and more often in June and July of 1794, called the Grand Terror or the Great Terror. And the 17th of July, 1794, 16 nuns attacked much attention by singing a religious song as they were being executed for treason. So when I was in graduate school at the University of Texas at Austin, I saw this play, and that was it. And they all literally, the last scene of the play is all the nuns marching up to the guillotine, and one less person is singing every couple of minutes, and you hear the guillotine come down. So they actually turned this into an opera, and it's like that famous in France. The terror ended 10 days later, and several important leaders of the Reign of Terror were executed, including Saints Just and Robespierre. The terror took the lives of between 18,000 and 40,000 people. Robespierre died due to the Thermidorian reaction against the Jacobites. It was a revolt against the revolution, otherwise called the counter-revolution, and Robespierre was one of the last to be guillotined. Eventually, Napoleon Bonaparte rose to be the Emperor of France. So he was who thought, this is great. We had our revolution. We got rid of the nobility. We got rid of the gentry. We got rid of the clergy. We got rid of the monasteries. We got rid of everything. Now we need to rewrite our laws, and we need to export our wonderful ideas to the rest of Europe. And they're going to just love it. It's going to be like, when Elvis hit America or the Beatles, they're just going to eat it up. So he did, and the three ideas are the three unclean frogs that we see in Revelations. Liberté, equalité, fraternité. And they borrowed it from America, from our own revolution. And now it was going to be expanded all over Europe. And we're going to see how it drops like a rock in a pond. So to justify the French expansionism of the French military campaigns on the claim that France had the right to spread the enlightened ideas of the French Revolution across Europe and also expand France into its so-called natural borders. In other words, it's natural for us to own all of Europe. I mean, that's should not be questioned. So Napoleon's invasions of other nations had the effect of spreading the concept of nationalism outside of France. So God always uses some military leader to accomplish his purpose. He has used Alexander the Great to spread things all over the earth at that time. He used Nebuchadnezzar as a tool to gather all the nations and put them under one umbrella. but they rise up and they fall down, just like we saw in Psalms chapter 2 and in Isaiah 40. So it's something for us to think about. He says, I put rulers in and I take them out, and I put them in and I take them out. This is exactly what he was. It's not that Napoleon was a great purpose. He served God's purpose for why he was there. So I love this. This is just so funny to me. So Napoleon runs out of money. Poor guy, can't rampage over nations anymore and run roughshod. So what does he do? He's like, I need a little spending cash. Who do I go to? Thomas Jefferson. What's up? I got all this land in North America I could care less about. Do you want to buy it? And Thomas Jefferson was scared at first because he thought, oh my gosh, this guy's going to come after us next. But then he decides, okay, I guess he's for real. And he makes a deal with him in the biggest gamble of his life. Did Thomas Jefferson let Congress know he was writing a huge check to France? Yes? No, he did not tell them. So he takes the biggest gamble of his life and sends James Monroe and Robert Livingston to make a deal with Napoleon in New Orleans. After losing the Battle of Haiti, astounded by selling all Napoleon lands in North America to Jefferson for $15 million, 3 cents an acre. Don't we wish we had money now? Back then, we could have hundreds of thousands of land. But this is incredible because what we basically did was America funded Napoleon's campaign all over Europe and into Russia. If he hadn't had our money from the Louisiana Purchase, he wouldn't have been able to do this. So the Louisiana Purchase was an acquisition of an astounding amount, over 800,000 square miles from US to France in 1803. The US paid 50 million francs and canceled the debts of 18 million francs, a total of 28 million francs. The Louisiana Territory included 15 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and you can read all the states that were included in it. It's a massive amount of land, more than we would ever get again. So this is what I really want you to get and see. These 3 frogs, and this is from Revelation, where it says, and I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon and out of the mouth of the beast and out of the mouth of the false prophet 3 unclean spirits, as it were frogs. For the spirit of the demons works signs which go forth between the kings of the whole world, to gather them together unto war of the great day of God, the Almighty. So what's the purpose of all of this? It's to change the world and gather them to fight against God. Does that seem a bit odd? Okay, when the Jews were going into the land with Joshua and they were coming against Ai and all these other forces, every single time you read about it, what happens with their enemy when they prepare for battle? They bring everybody. They bring it all to the battlefield. Nobody's left behind. They all come in for the battle. When we read Psalms 83 about the nations that are going to come up against Israel, they're all in, and they get completely wiped out. And that's how they conquer the land, because they hate them so much they want to do this. So this is where I really want you to see the French Revolution is that one of the square in the middle, and how it affects everybody else. By 1820, Greece revolts, Naples and Sicily revolt, Spain and Portugal revolt against Italy and Greece. The next ring out, which is 1830, I'll start at the top, is the agitation in England against the Reform Act of 1832, the revolt of Belgium from Holland, the revolt of the German states, the revolts in Hungary, Serbia, Italian states, the revolt of the Spanish and Portuguese colony, and the foundation of Central and South America. All that happened within 10 years. How many of you all know the name Simón Bolívar? Who was Simón Bolívar? Yes, so he wanted to liberate all of Central America and all of South America. He helped every country that you see in Central and South America revolt against Spain and proclaim their independence. His vision was the whole continent being one country, but they didn't do that. They all became independent states. So Simón Bolívar saw himself as being a modern day Napoleon, carrying these ideas out in Central and South America. So you see how this idea is like either gangrene or whatever. Everybody has the right for self-determination. Everybody should be free. There shouldn't be any rulership. There shouldn't be any leaders. There shouldn't really be any laws. So by the 1840s, they got the end of the Chartist agitation in England, the revolts in Poland, revolts in Germany, revolts in the Austrian states, the desire for independence among the Balkan people, and the revolts of Italy against Austria's supremacy. What I want you to see is right before World War I, or during the middle of World War I, is two massive empires destroyed by this idea of liberty, fraternity, equality. It was in the middle of World War I. I mean, these people were all committed. The Ottoman Empire and Russia. In Russia, we know the Tsar Nicholas II had been ignoring the poverty in his own country, hadn't built schools or hospitals. He was known as Bloody Nicholas because he allowed so many bad things to happen, and every time as people tried to tell him peaceably what was going on, he shot them. So eventually, he was forced to abdicate. He had fired his own generals and gotten involved in World War I. He didn't even make it home. They made him abdicate on the train for himself and his son, which he did voluntarily, and then the entire Romanov family was annihilated, completely killed off. The Ottomans, who were called the sick man of Europe, were defeated during World War I, so that empire was completely obliterated. So you see how our own American independence idea spread to France and then to the rest of the world. It was like a contagion. It was like a pandemic that it did this. And this is going to lead up to this guy, which I don't think we have time to get into, but we're going to talk about Theodor Herzl next time and his dream for a homeland. And after 2,000 years of wandering the earth and not having a homeland, am I too early or too late? I got a couple more minutes? Okay. So what I want to make a distinguishing about, you all know Theodor Herzl fairly well. What you don't maybe know was his vision for the new Jew was what? What was the new Jew going to be? Religious or secular? Multiple choice. Secular. So he wanted to divorce themselves from the past completely. He thought, this is our problem. This is why we haven't assimilated. This is why we don't fit in, why we need a homeland, but we need to divorce ourselves completely from the old Jew. We need to move forward with a new nation, new laws, and it's going to be completely secular. So I'll say that at the beginning just to remember that. And he didn't live very long. So Theodor Herzl was a visionary behind the modern Zionism as a restitution of the Jewish homeland. Herzl was born in Budapest in 1860, a giant of the Jewish history. He stood 5 feet 5 high. He was educated in the spirit of the German Jewish Enlightenment and learned to appreciate secular culture. In 1878, the family moved to Vienna, and in 1884, Herzl was awarded a doctorate of law from the University of Vienna. Herzl first encountered the anti-Semitism that would shape his life and the fate of the Jews in the 20th century while studying at the University of Vienna, and this is 1882. Later, during the stay in Paris as a journalist, he brought face-to-face with the problem. At the time, he regarded the Jewish problem as a social issue and wrote the drama The Ghetto in 1894, which assimilated the conversion are rejected as solutions. He hoped that the ghetto would lead to the debate and ultimately to the solution based on mutual tolerance and respect between Christians and Jews. So a lot of thinkers are around this time trying to figure out, how do we solve this Jewish Christian problem or this European and Jewry problem that's existing in Europe? So once again, France has always been extremely anti-Semitic, hating the Jews. And this was the Dreyfus affair that affected the whole world at that time. It was in everybody's newspapers of what was going on and the injustices. So he was a reporter at this time and was basically finding out what was going on. So it was in 1894, Captain Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish officer in French army, was unjustly accused of treason, mainly because of the prevailing anti-Semitic atmosphere. Herzl witnessed mobs shouting, "Death to the Jews" in France. the home of the French Revolution, and resolved that there was only one solution, a mass migration of Jews to the land where they could call their own. Thus, the Dreyfus case became one of the intermediates of the genius of political Zionism. So back up just a hair. What did Napoleon think of the Jews? He was good to them. He actually protected them under law. So they had no problems, and that's why a lot of Jews moved to France. Poland did the same thing. They wrote laws that protected the Jews, and they came. Anybody ever know the background story of Savannah, Georgia? Okay, so really funny story to me. I love Savannah because of the planning and all the squares, but they had a yellow fever epidemic that was severe. People were dying everywhere. The Jews that I think had come from Spain that went to England and got kicked out of there, came to America seeking refuge, and they were docked on the Savannah River outside of Savannah. But Savannah had laws, no Catholics, no Jews at all. So they said, well, let's talk to the people of the town council. So the representatives on the ship got out and talked to the Savannah leaders. They were like, look, you let us live here and we'll provide the solution to this yellow fever problem you got. And I was like, okay, so they literally rewrote the laws of Savannah to allow Jews to come in to cure the yellow fever epidemic. And one of the first, I went to go visit the first synagogue that was ever built in Savannah, Georgia. And it's just amazing the Jewish presence in Savannah and how that got started based on this. So it's just really powerful how this all happens. So Herzl concluded that anti-Semitism was a stable and immutable factor in human society, which assimilated did not solve. So he wanted to have the Jewish state. Herzl argued that the essence of the Jewish problem was not individual, but national. He decided that the Jews could gain acceptance to the world if they would only cease to be a national anomaly. So he saw the issue is we've got to make our own area. The Jews are one people, he said, and their plight could be transformed into positive force by establishing a Jewish state with the consent of great powers. He saw the Jewish question as an interpersonal political question to be dealt with in the arena of international politics. So what he's saying is you can't solve this problem on the individual level. We got to solve it nationally. And we have to stop being an anomaly in other people's countries. We need our own so that we won't be persecuted anymore. So we'll stop there and we'll talk about his very influential book, Out Neuland, which means old, new land. That's what Out Neuland means. But his book shocked the world and everybody got involved because they said, okay, we do need to do this. There's the old land of Israel. We need to make it new and we need to have a refuge place for all the Jews to go. So we'll stop there for today. Does anybody have any questions at all? Yes, Randy.
Funded the American or the French debt. Where did he get his money from?
He, some of the money was what the French had given in bonds, and he liquidated them into cash, but the rest of it he paid for out of his own pocket from his own businesses.
He had businesses, okay.
I don't have receipts, Randy, but you know, he did do a good job.
I was just wondering what business he was in.
Rob?
So where do we find, can you explain where we historically draw the correlation between, because even people that don't have a religious background will disparagingly refer to the French as frogs, right?
Yeah.
So where does that come from? Do you know?
It goes back, the fleur-de-lis and the frogs go all the way back. So there's, they refer to themselves as frogs, but it goes way back in their history. I think it goes back to Charlemagne, and there's stuff on the flag, but it's well known for being that. And they also, I think, are known as pheasants and frogs. But anyway, when you go to Blenheim Palace, there's like all these motifs of either a frog or the pheasant being killed by a lion, which is Great Britain. So it's almost everywhere. Well, thank you guys.